Playback Social Entrepreneurs, leading the way on socially responsible issues in business, entertainment, and science. On this episode of Playback Social Entrepreneurs, climate change, COVID, and commerce, a special report on the impact from an unrelenting series of crises.
The coronavirus, the pandemic opened up this portal, and you saw the disparity and you saw the systemic neglect that it created.
Environmental, social, and financial trends, forcing companies to rethink the bottom line.
We now realize that special interests, corporate interests, financial interests shape globalization in ways which benefited their interests but did not benefit the world as a whole.
Old assumptions shattered.
We have to stare climate change in the face. We can no longer deny it exists.
Supply chains transformed.
What would the people in our community do if we weren't here? Who would they turn to?
Consumers today are demanding more.
They're fed up, they feel somewhat powerless, but there are people that are always going to make a difference.
Player power, a special profile on the pioneers of sustainable fashion.
When looking at sustainability, I often think it's about risk management. If you don't do it right, the cost to your business of doing it wrong is going to be enormous.
How will business leaders adapt? What business models will thrive? Who will be the innovators shaping our economy? On this episode of Playback Social Entrepreneurs. The COVID-19 health crisis, climate change, and the global recession. Three distinct challenges, each one reinforcing the others to create a dangerous moment in time. One that is forcing the world economy to pause and making financial leaders reevaluate their priorities. Nobel Prize-winning economist Joseph Stiglitz has studied global markets expansion and contraction for decades.
In the 90s, we saw globalization as offering enormous potential to countries all over the world. We now realize that special interests, corporate interests, financial interests shape globalization in ways which benefited their interests but did not benefit the world as a whole.
He was awarded the Nobel Prize for his theory on information manipulation and has continued to speak out on the impact of economic inequality.
A lot of the problems that we've seen in the 90s were problems related to information.
Alternating series of bubbles followed by recessions led to dramatic income inequality.
It was also a decade in which there were enormous imbalances, in which greed, corporate greed, CEO greed, manifested itself at levels which the world had never seen before. That kind of greed, problems in the banking sector, problems in accounting, all of those were brought out. It fed the bubble, but then made what happened afterwards all the worse.
In the wake of that boom and bust cycle, business leaders accelerated their search for new ways to remedy market inequalities, increasingly trying to incorporate social responsibility into their operations. It was the first wave of social entrepreneurship.
GDP is not an end in itself, it's a means to an end. And if GDP goes up, but most people's standard of living goes down, something is wrong. Our economy is not performing.
Inspired by those pioneers, today's innovators are also adapting to the current commercial reality. Davos, Switzerland. The dawn of a new decade, and for the first time, environmental issues filled the top 5 places on the World Economic Forum's annual risk report. Against that backdrop, the COVID health crisis emerged, spreading across the globe and creating sweeping economic downturns and financial strain. The global economy is now expected to contract nearly 5%, the most punishing reversal of fortunes since the Great Depression. Congressman Raul Grijalva of Arizona has seen the impact on the American West.
The coronavirus, the pandemic opened up this portal, and you looked at poor communities and indigenous communities and tribal land. And for many of us, it was not new information, but they had all the pre-existing conditions that are in those areas: bad water, bad air, high instances of asthma and other respiratory diseases because of that, and lack of access you're telling tribal communities, wash your hands every day, quarantine yourself from other parts you have multi-generational families, you have a high degree of unemployment. In some 30% still don't have potable running water and sanitation on their lands. And so it opened up this portal, and you saw the disparity, and you saw the systemic neglect that it created.